I'm Nichole.
And I'm Christy.
And we're the Clarity Girls. And we wanted to talk today, which is a totally different day than the last video we made. So Christy and I wanted to talk about the stupid shit that goes through your head when you're in your spiritual awakening.
Yeah, because it certainly is a crazy experience when you're tapping into it.
It's like walking into an engineering class and having no idea what the hell anybody's talking about. Because you know for yourself that you've had these experiences, or you've had this connection, or you've had this like knowing that's happened, and then somebody's like, are your chakras aligned? And you're like, what the fuck is a chakra?
Yeah.
Is it on my body? Is it near me? Is it around me?
Because you
Is it
don't know
inside
any
me?
of these words, so I feel like one of the best approaches for this is like the nod and smile, and I went to that a lot. Like,
Yeah, of course.
That's good.
Sure.
I still use it, you know, with people who are more connected with certain concepts and.
Totally. Yes. And you always have to pretend, and then you Google it later. That's the etiquette for spirituality.
Nod and smile.
But
Write that down.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're here to help you not feel like an idiot when you're talking to people who are more spiritual than you.
Yeah.
But it was a really funny story is that when Christy and I started to develop our intuition, I was going to a mentor up in Buffalo, and we were talking, I was going to a lot of classes on spirit guides. And so I met these classes on spirit guides, and Christy and I began talking about spirit guides. And Christy says,
well, I was exploring meditation at the time and I desperately wanted to connect with my guide and was setting that intention beforehand. Like, this is what I'm doing. Every day I would meditate. I want to connect with my guides. And so I'm meditating, and I come out of meditation and recognize that the vision that I had was of Hitler. And so in a panic, immediately out of meditation, I run to my phone, and I'm like, Nichole, like, what is Hitler my spirit guide? What is this? I was absolutely panicked.
so chances are Hitler is not your spirit guide.
And he's not, by the way.
And he's not Christy's spirit guide. Although a lot of people believe Hitler and people who do bad things are highly evolved to create change in the world. I don't know if I'm still working on that concept, but that's, the truth for a lot of people. But Hitler isn't Christy's spirit guide, and if you're wondering if Hitler is your spirit guide,
Probably not.
Hitler's probably busy on the other side.
Yeah.
I feel like he's got some, like...
I feel like he maybe immediately reincarnated, too,
He probably is, like, maybe your little brother. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or your cat. I don't know. Cats are assholes. My cats just go and they're just like... I'll be staring at them and they'll still do it. Just knock shit off the counter and stare at me while they're doing it, like, vindictively. That's probably Hitler. Your cat is probably Hitler.
So, like, if your cat has some kind of a weird mustache, he might be Hitler. So, anyway.
But probably not your spirit guide.
This video is everything. I think, Nichole, you should tell a story about when you went to your first, like, what was it? Like a mediumship class or a psychic development class is what it was.
Fucking terrifying. So I went to a boot camp.
I was too scared to go. I was invited.
No. I went to a boot camp. I went to a psychic boot camp. Now, if you don't really know much about psychic stuff yourself, and you walk into a psychic boot camp with a ton of people who totally know what they're doing, it's terrifying. And, like, it wasn't the content. Like, we did, like, a class, and we, did this thing. But then there was this part. I know. Then there was this part where we all split up into different rooms. It was a big building. And they blindfolded me. No, this sounds creepy and sexual, but it's not. I kind of wish it was for the record, but I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But so they blindfolded me, and they had people come in behind me, and this was a test to reading, right? Of if this was correct, I basically would read the person behind me, see if I could connect with a loved one who had crossed, and they would just tap my shoulder if I was right or wrong. It was like right shoulder for right and left shoulder for, left. And by the time I was done with this reading, I turned around and the person's crying. I didn't know I could do that, by the way, at this point in time. I knew I had some kind of gifts because I got drunk once. This was true story of my spiritual awakening. I had a lot of stuff happen before this moment, but the big moment was I had a lot of Jack Daniels.
Mm-hmm.
It was
a night that we hung out together, by the way.
It was a night that Christy and I hung out together. Mm-hmm. I went home. I'm laying in bed with my husband, and I start to feel his grandmother who crossed, who I had never met, and I start reading him like it was nothing. And then the next morning I woke up and I was like pretending that did not happen because Mom and I had enough Jack Daniels and that's probably fine. And then he came up to me and he goes, "You have to do that again." And I'm like, "Oh, I thought we were going to pretend this didn't happen." But here we are pretending it happened, and now I have to figure out how I talk to dead people while I was drunk on Jack Daniels. But I think, like, as scary as that moment was for me to be in a room blindfolded, blindly reading people out behind me.
I told her I would run. I would have run out of the room.
Probably. It was really intimidating, but the thing is like spirit takes over sometimes, and it just goes, and it happens, and you're saying things that you're like, wow, I didn't really even know I knew that. And I turned around, and the woman was crying, and I had connected with her brother who crossed in a car accident that she was in. And for me, that was the moment of like, fuck, I guess I can't deny that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think everybody who's intuitive needs one of those moments of like, there's a point that comes when you're intuitive or you're a medium. And I know a lot of people have issues with mediums and psychics and all of this stuff, but there's stuff that you shouldn't know that you know. Just know.
We all have that.
And even as a psychic medium, we're like, how did I know that? And after you snap out of it, you're like, I have no idea why I would know that information about you.
Right. And I think, like, what you're saying is, like, to have those moments of validation are so important. But
so important.
You cannot get there unless you put yourself out there. Like, I'm saying I would have run. I wasn't ready yet. But I had to kind of do that a little bit later through my development. But it's like, when you start to say, oh, I'm feeling this, or I'm thinking about this, or I'm seeing this, and you just kind of allow yourself to flow with it.
Yeah.
This is where it kicks in. I mean, this is where you start to get the validation. And when you can do that in a place that feels safe, like where you're at, where it was like you were just learning, it feels really good. And so it's just important to try to, when you're practicing, trust it. And to do that with people that you can have validation with or you can safely practice with.
Well, and I always say play.
Mm-hmm.
I use the word play a lot. And I always tell people, when I'm doing psychic development with people, and they're like, I don't know, I don't feel anything. I'm like, just make it up. Mm-hmm. Because the thing is our imagination is tightly intertwined, which is why kids have these brilliant imaginary friends that aren't really imaginary friends. But our imagination is so tightly intertwined with our spirituality that usually when you start the process of pretending, you get all of this information that's free-flowing and correct anyway.
Absolutely. And it's like, when you start going with it, it just flows.
Totally.
Right? And for me, like, when I was really opening up, my intuition really got stronger when it would catch me off guard.
Yes.
Too. So that was the other thing, is I was so focused on, I want to connect with my guides, and it has to be this way, and I want to read, and it has to be this way. And it didn't connect in that way. It was more like when I was driving in my car, or when I was just meditating or relaxed, and I wasn't focusing on anything else, I would get this stuff coming through, and I was like, oh my God, that's something. You know? So it's like, sometimes you have to let your guard down, too, and just allow it.
And not question it, because one of the things that I've learned, probably the hard way, is even through readings, is you have to just say whatever's showing up for you, and you can't decide what it means for other people. And I think when I first started, I felt the need to prove myself. And I think every medium or every intuitive goes through this process of feeling like, well, now that I've announced that I'm batshit crazy to the public human, world, I have to, like, make sure they know I'm for real.
Right.
And then it makes you completely inaccurate because you're trying to process it from a logical place to make sure you're right. When if you would have just, I remember I had a friend come over, and I remember trying to tell her, and I swear to you, I talked to my friend who was a lesbian, and I always tell her, this is like coming out, and she totally agrees with me, because it is, people have an issue with it. There are people who have religious issues with it. There are people who just are skeptical and like hate people who scam other people's money or whatever. But I remember feeling this need to like prove to her And her grandpa had passed recently, and I was getting him coming through, and he was showing me this plaid pattern, and I'm like, plaid, okay. And my logical brain's over here like, okay, what's plaid? It's got to be, oh, he must have wore flannel. So I like posed that to her, and she's like, oh no, he didn't really wear that. And I'm like, God, you know, this is going well. I'm not proving myself very well. But if I would have just said plaid, if I would have just said exactly what was coming to me, it was correct, because he had a plaid blanket that he slept with and was on his hospice bed that she now sleeps with. And that would have been entirely meaningful for her, but because my logical brain was so pressured to make it into something, I did. And, you know, and so I think as you develop your intuition, you learn how your intuition works so that you're not making those logical errors, because that's all that is error, is logic. You know what I mean? And intuition, if you are just raw with it, if you just say, this is exactly what I'm seeing, here's what does that mean to you? Because it doesn't mean, plaid means nothing to me. So I can't, you know, unless I'm trying to make it mean something, it just doesn't.
Right.
And there's that pressure as you're developing your intuition to prove to people, you know.
Yeah.
And there shouldn't be, you know.
You know, I think, and that's it, is like practicing in that safe environment, but also just letting it be what it is and just kind of allowing that to flow, because that's where you have the real experiences. Wow, I'm breathing so hard. I'm sorry, guys, but like this is like...
That's a lot of gin. You drank a lot of gin.
Yeah. Good for me.
Good for you.
Good for me. It's a good night.
So if you're developing your intuition and you would love to learn more about it, you can hook it up with Christy or I when we're sober.
Yes. We don't operate our sessions or readings.
We don't operate any of our business other than this spirituality.
Greatest name ever, by the way.
YouTube.
Yeah.
With sobriety, we operate everything else with sobriety.
Normally we're sober.
Yeah. So, if you want to learn more about developing your intuition, keep an eye out for our blogs, but also feel free to book a session or show up to one of our development classes, because Christy hosts tarot development, and I've been slacking, but occasionally do host psychic development classes.
Yeah, and keep an eye out for the trainings and stuff that we're going to be doing through our
Clarity
University.
This is so clever. You're so impressed. You should be, because it's impressive. Yeah.
We should stop talking.
We should just turn off the video.
Bye.